Amidst the dense woods that swallowed the light, there stood an abandoned building known as Willowbrook Asylum. For years, whispers of its chilling history had kept even the bravest souls at bay. The stories claimed that within its crumbling walls, unspeakable horrors had occurred, experiments gone awry, patients driven to madness, and the malevolent spirits of the tormented trapped within its decaying chambers. The asylum's exterior was a grim reflection of its past. Vines had consumed its brick walls, windows were shattered, and the once majestic entrance had crumbled into a mound of debris. Graffiti and symbols of the occult adorned its surfaces, a testament to the daring few who had ventured inside. On a moonless night, a group of thrill-seekers gathered outside Willowbrook, their hearts pounding with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Leading the group was Lara, a skeptic with an insatiable curiosity for the unknown. Her dark eyes glinted in the dim light as she flashed a defiant grin. Beside her was Mark, an aspiring filmmaker who saw this expedition as a chance to capture something truly haunting. Emily, the quiet and introspective artist, clutched her sketchbook close, her unease palpable. Finally, there was Alex, the thrill junkie whose unrelenting enthusiasm masked a growing unease. With flashlights in hand, they cautiously entered the asylum, their steps echoing through the desolate corridors. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and a pervasive sense of dread. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon rooms that seemed frozen in time, beds with restraints, rusted surgical instruments, and journals filled with the manic ramblings of patients who had long since vanished. In one room, they discovered a metal door slightly ajar, leading to a subterranean level. The room's walls were adorned with crude drawings of faces contorted in anguish. Lara, leading the way, descended the narrow staircase, her flashlight flickering as if the building itself resisted their intrusion. The basement was colder, the darkness thicker, and the silence more suffocating. As they explored the subterranean labyrinth, the group began to feel a palpable sense of being watched. Whispers, faint at first, crept into their ears, like the breeze carrying secrets from another time. Emily's grip on her sketchbook tightened as she swore she glimpsed shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't. Mark, determined to capture the eerie atmosphere, began to record their journey with his camera. Lara's flashlight illuminated a doorway at the end of a narrow corridor, revealing a room adorned with peculiar symbols. The air grew heavy, and a chilling wind howled through the chamber, extinguishing their flashlights one by one. Panic welled up within them, and they fumbled to relight their sources of comfort. It was then that they heard a child's laughter, innocent yet utterly out of place in the asylum's malevolent embrace. Mark's camera suddenly turned on by itself, its screen displaying distorted images of the group's terrified faces. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls, and an unseen force seemed to push against them. Desperation gave way to a fight for survival as they scrambled towards the exit, their steps a cacophony of fear. Back in the moonlit corridor, they collapsed against the decaying walls, their breaths ragged. The child's laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling quiet that resonated with their racing hearts. Emily, her hands trembling, opened her sketchbook to find that the pages were filled with drawings of the symbols they had seen earlier, grotesque, twisted shapes that seemed to seep malevolence onto the paper. As they debated whether to continue or flee, an eerie voice, distorted and resonating from all directions, whispered a single word: "Stay." Their eyes widened in terror as they realized the voice was not an echo of the past, but a presence among them. The very walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if the asylum itself was sentient, feeding on their fear. With no other option, they pressed forward, determined to confront whatever entity had taken an interest in them. As they ventured deeper into the asylum's bowels, they came upon a chamber unlike any other. Within, a grotesque amalgamation of human remains and rusted metal lay suspended, a macabre centerpiece to the room. Symbols glowed on the walls, and a voice filled with sorrow and rage reverberated through the air. The entity revealed itself as a tormented soul, a former patient who had suffered at the hands of sadistic doctors. Bound by their own pain and the malevolent energy of the asylum, they had become an instrument of suffering. The group's presence had awakened this dormant force, and now it sought to claim them as its own. As the entity's grip tightened, the group realized that their only hope lay in confronting the truth of Willowbrook's horrors. Uncovering the stories of the victims, they unearthed the depths of cruelty that had transpired within these walls. Armed with this knowledge, they confronted the entity, its form shifting and writhing in agony. In a crescendo of dread, the entity unleashed a final, terrifying surge of energy. The room trembled, and the walls seemed to bleed darkness. But the group, fueled by their determination and the spirits of the past, fought back with an intensity born of desperation. The entity wailed, its hold weakening as the symbols on the walls cracked and crumbled. Light flooded the room, banishing the shadows and piercing the darkness that had festered for decades. The group collapsed, victorious yet shaken, as the asylum itself seemed to exhale a sigh of relief. As they made their way out of the asylum, the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of pink and gold. Behind them, Willowbrook stood silent and defeated, its malevolent history laid bare. The group knew that while they had faced unimaginable horrors, they had also unearthed the truth and released trapped souls from their torment. But as they walked away, the wind carried a faint whisper, a promise that the building's nightmares might not rest so easily, and that the truth they had uncovered was only the beginning. In the heart of a remote countryside, shrouded by a perpetual fog, stood the towering silhouette of Ravenswood Manor. The mansion's stone walls were weathered by time, its windows shattered, and its doors creaking in the wind. Locals whispered tales of unspeakable horrors that had unfolded within its decaying halls, but none dared to tread too close. Nina, an intrepid urban explorer with a fascination for the macabre, had heard these tales and felt a magnetic pull towards the manor. Armed with her camera and a determination to uncover the truth, she set out on a journey that would test her courage like never before. The air was damp and chilling as Nina approached Ravenswood Manor, the mist swirling around her feet like ghostly fingers. The trees seemed to lean away from the mansion, as if recoiling from its sinister presence. Undeterred, Nina crossed the threshold and entered the mansion's gloomy interior. The grand entrance hall was a cavern of darkness, its chandelier reduced to twisted metal and shattered crystal. Cobwebs clung to the ornate moldings, and the portraits on the walls stared out with hollow eyes. As Nina ventured further, the echoes of her footsteps seemed to be accompanied by faint whispers that twisted her name. Intrigued and unnerved, Nina followed the voices as they led her deeper into the mansion. She passed rooms that held remnants of forgotten opulence, rotting furniture, torn curtains, and fragments of a bygone era. In one room, a grand piano stood, its keys cloaked in dust. Nina hesitated, her fingers brushing the keys, producing a discordant sound that reverberated through the silence. Suddenly, the piano keys began to move on their own, playing a haunting melody that hung heavy in the air. Nina's heart raced as she backed away, her camera capturing the surreal scene. The melody seemed to swell with emotion, carrying a sense of melancholy and longing that sent shivers down her spine. With each step she took, the mansion seemed to shift and warp, its layout defying logic. Doors led to dead ends, hallways twisted upon themselves, and the air grew colder, laden with a suffocating sense of dread. The whispers around her intensified, forming a cacophony of voices that pleaded and whispered maddening secrets. As Nina explored a dimly lit corridor, she encountered a mirror that hung crookedly on the wall. But her reflection was distorted, contorted into a nightmarish visage that grinned back at her with malevolent glee. She stumbled back, her heart pounding, and as she turned to flee, a figure materialized in the mirror behind her, a spectral woman in tattered clothing, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. Frozen in terror, Nina watched as the ghostly figure reached out, her fingers trailing through the air as if begging for release. The woman's voice echoed in Nina's mind, a voice that spoke of betrayal and torment, a voice that seemed to seep into her very soul. With a gasp, Nina tore her gaze away from the mirror and fled, the mansion's layout shifting and disorienting her at every turn. The whispers grew louder, the voices intertwining in a symphony of madness. She stumbled into a room that seemed untouched by time, a room that bore an air of innocence amidst the malevolence. On a dusty desk, she discovered a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. As she leafed through its contents, the journal's words revealed the tragic tale of Eleanor Ravenswood, a young woman who had lived within these walls centuries ago. Eleanor had been accused of witchcraft, betrayed by those she loved, and imprisoned within the very mansion she called home. Nina's heart ached for Eleanor's suffering, and as she read on, the voices around her began to shift, now carrying an undertone of grief and longing. The mansion seemed to tremble, and the walls seemed to throb with a heartbeat that resonated with Eleanor's pain. With newfound purpose, Nina retraced her steps, guided by the voices and her empathy for Eleanor's plight. She found herself back in the grand entrance hall, facing the shattered remains of the chandelier. The voices swelled around her, a chorus of sorrow and redemption. With a deep breath, Nina raised her camera, capturing the essence of the mansion's haunting. In that moment, the air crackled with energy, and the mansion seemed to come alive. The chandelier's broken pieces soared into the air, spinning and weaving themselves back together, and the walls pulsed with an otherworldly light. The voices crescendoed, merging into a single mournful wail that echoed through the manor. And then, with a final, ethereal sigh, Eleanor Ravenswood materialized before Nina, her form translucent yet filled with an otherworldly grace. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, and Nina hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in Eleanor's. In that instant, the mansion trembled, its walls cracking and crumbling as if releasing the pent-up anguish that had festered for centuries. The mist outside lifted, and the morning sun broke through, bathing the manor in its warm light. As the mansion disintegrated around them, Eleanor's form began to fade, her expression one of gratitude and release. Nina stumbled outside, blinking in the sunlight as the remains of Ravenswood Manor vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but the echo of its tragic history. The whispers had subsided, replaced by the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. Nina knew she had witnessed something inexplicable and profound, a journey that transcended the boundaries of the living and the spectral. As she walked away from the now vanished mansion, she carried with her the memory of Eleanor Ravenswood, a soul finally set free from the chains of a disturbing and tragic past. Nestled deep within a remote valley, the Willowbrook Mill had long stood abandoned, its imposing presence shrouded in mystery. Locals spoke of its sinister past with hushed voices, recounting tales of unexplainable occurrences and the unsettling feeling that something malevolent lingered within its crumbling walls. One moonless night, a group of 4 friends, Josh, Maya, Eric, and Sarah, decided to challenge their fears and explore the infamous mill. Armed with flashlights and trepidation, they approached the structure, the eerie silence hanging heavy in the air. The mill's towering silhouette loomed over them, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch toward them like grasping hands. The mill's exterior was a testament to its decades of neglect. Its wooden beams were weathered and rotting, windows shattered and draped with cobwebs like veils of forgotten souls. As the group ventured inside, the air grew heavy with a damp, earthy smell, and the creaking floorboards beneath their feet echoed through the empty space. The main chamber of the mill was vast, its walls adorned with rusted machinery that whispered of a time long past. But the machinery wasn't the source of the unsettling feeling that settled upon them. It was the quiet, a silence so deep that it seemed to consume sound itself. Their flashlights barely pierced the darkness, casting trembling beams that danced upon the walls. Mia's gaze was drawn to a narrow staircase that spiraled upward into the shadows. Against the cautionary protests of the others, she ascended the stairs, her footsteps muffled by the suffocating silence. As she reached the upper floor, the air seemed colder, and an inexplicable dread coiled around her heart. The upper floor was dominated by a series of dimly lit rooms, their doorways yawning open like hungry mouths. Mia's flashlight flickered, casting intermittent pools of light that illuminated the peeling wallpaper and decaying furniture. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, a sensation of being watched by something unseen. In the corner of one room, Mia's flashlight revealed an old wooden crib, its paint chipped and worn. As she approached, her breath hitched, and the crib began to rock gently, as if moved by an invisible hand. A shiver ran down her spine as she backed away, her footsteps echoing her unease. Back on the lower floor, the others had grown anxious in Mia's absence. As they exchanged worried glances, a distant sound caught their attention, a faint, haunting melody that seemed to drift through the air. Its melancholic notes were accompanied by the soft patter of footsteps, growing louder and closer. In the dim light, they caught sight of a shadowy figure moving through the mill, its form distorted and fragmented. Panic surged within them, and they followed the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like desperate beacons. The haunting melody seemed to be emanating from a room at the end of a narrow corridor. As they reached the room, their flashlights revealed an old phonograph, its needle tracing the grooves of an ancient record. The haunting melody filled the room, its sorrowful notes spiraling through the air like a lament for forgotten souls. The shadowy figure materialized before them, its features shifting and elusive, like a specter from another realm. Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure's form wavered, and the air grew colder still. An ethereal voice, both sorrowful and accusing, whispered, "You should not have come." Before their eyes, the figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving behind a palpable sense of despair. The phonograph continued to play its mournful tune, its melody entwined with the weight of untold secrets. Driven by a mixture of fear and determination, the group delved further into the mill's depths, their journey marked by unsettling encounters, fleeting glimpses of figures that vanished upon closer inspection, whispers that echoed through the corridors, and the sensation of being watched from the darkness. In a hidden chamber, they stumbled upon a collection of old photographs, their sepia tones depicting people in outdated clothing. The faces were distorted, as if time itself had eroded their features. But as they studied the photographs, they recognized familiar faces, their own faces, worn by the years they had not lived. Realization crashed over them like a tidal wave. The mill was a place out of time, a nexus of past and future, where the echoes of lives that had yet to be lived mingled with the remnants of those long gone. The haunting melody was a lament for souls, trapped in the mill's temporal web, a mournful plea for release. As the realization settled upon them, the mill seemed to pulse with a newfound energy, its walls vibrating with a resonance that harmonized with the haunting melody. The shadows coalesced, forming the figure once more, its voice clear and resolute. "We are the echoes of time, trapped within these walls. We beseech you to break the cycle, to release us from this eternal torment." Mia's heart raced as she stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "How can we free you?" The figure's form flickered, its expression one of profound gratitude. "The key lies within your hands. Play the melody backwards, and the temporal bonds shall unravel." With trembling hands, Maya reversed the phonograph's needle, the haunting melody now a disjointed, eerie cacophony. The mill trembled, its walls vibrating as if the fabric of time itself were tearing apart. The figure wavered, its form fragmenting into particles of light that dissolved into the air. As the last note faded, the mill's silence lifted, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant sounds of the outside world. The air was free of the suffocating dread that had once consumed the space. The mill, no longer a prison of echoes, stood as a relic of a time gone by. Josh, Maya, Eric, and Sarah emerged from the mill, their hearts heavy with the weight of the experience. They carried with them the memory of the silent terrors that had haunted the Willowbrook Mill, a place where the boundaries of time and reality had blurred, and where the echoes of the past and the future had intertwined in a chilling symphony of the unknown.